Hi. I have only a few minutes, so I'm going to read a couple very brief things. We talked in my nonfiction workshop about how to take notes and how to pay close attention to the world around you. I'm going to read to you a little bit from something called the Manual of Scientific Inquiry, which came out in the 1850s when the Admiralty in the United Kingdom was kind of taking over the world, and they wanted to know what they owned, and they encouraged people to, on their ships, to pay attention to what they did, and this will talk a little bit about that. I hope it's useful to all writers of nonfiction and fiction too. In the section on earthquake phenomena, Robert Mallet starts with the etymology of the word seismology, and then explains how the shaking of the ground in earthquakes moves outward from the epicenter in waves. Of course, one wishes to measure the speed of these waves, and Mallet makes a brilliant suggestion. Since the earthquake will knock things over, all an observer needs to do is attach a light cord to the pendulum of his grandfather clock, drilling and greasing holes through the sides of the clock case to get the cord out. Then the ends of the string can be attached to a narrow log stood on end. When the earthquake comes, it will knock over the log, which no matter which way it falls will pull the cord, restrict the pendulum, and thereby stop the clock at that second. So there's a diagram. Assuming the clock was set to Greenwich time, people surrounding the earthquake need only compare at what time their clock stopped to have a record of the speed and direction of the seismic wave. No special equipment needed, no special knowledge needed, just a clock and a little bit of ambition, and anybody could be a seismologist, even a seismographer. The Manual of Scientific Inquiry is a book about science after there were scientists, but before science became a spectator sport. It's filled with that spirit, filled with advice that helps scientists, but is also useful for, as its title explicitly states, travelers in general, which really means everyone. Section after section gives general suggestions that not only serve those observing the particular scientific processes covered in that section, but actually should always be followed by any enterprising traveler anxious to increase understanding. For example, in the section on geography, W.J. Hamilton tells his readers that it may be perhaps expedient to mention a few general points which should be constantly borne in mind as the basis of all observations, inasmuch as without them, all individual records, however carefully made, must be desultory and unsatisfactory. Most prominent amongst these general points is the necessity of acquiring a habit of writing down in a notebook, either immediately or at the earliest opportunity, the observations made and information obtained. 1,000 circumstances occur daily to a traveler in distant regions, which from repeated observation may appear insignificant to himself, but which may be of the greatest importance to others when brought home in the pages of his notebook. It is dangerous to trust much to the memory on such subjects. Hamilton, once president of the Royal Society, also urges observers to avoid overgeneralizing. Just because it's rocky here doesn't mean it's rocky on the other side of the hill. He reminds his observer to carry a compass, too, saying in summation that an observer should acquire the habit of never quitting his ship without his notebook and pencil and his pocket compass. And although at times it may seem irksome to have to remember and to fetch these materials, the traveler, if he acquires the habit of constantly using them with readiness, will never have reason to regret the delay or the inconvenience. In providing himself with such useful companions, another life lesson, a handbook of preparedness in a few sentences. And in the section on earthquakes, Mallet makes another point. The observer should not content himself with hearsay. He must see for himself. When questioned, people might at least exaggerate or even, for any number of reasons, prevaricate. That's why the observer should use his own senses and take his own observations, for as Mallet says, nature, rightly questioned, never lies. That is a little bit about making observation as a writer, and I hope you all take it into account. The other tiny section that I will read to you comes from my book, No Man's Lands, about retracing the journey of Odysseus all through the Mediterranean. And writers are commonly asked how you present boring information in a way that doesn't bore people to death. Well, I was going to be talking about thousands of years of Homeric scholarship, which is kind of the definition of boring. And so I had to find a way to do that, so I hope this will give you an example of how that might be done. What's called the Homeric question in classic circles remains unresolved to this day. Regarding Homer, the experts agree on these facts. Homer either did or did not exist. He lived in the 9th century BC, unless it was the 8th or 10th or not at all. He wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, or one of them, or neither, or perhaps other lost poems. Either he actually wrote or he dictated, since he was either literate or illiterate. Either he was blind or he was not, and if he was born, if he ever was, in Smyrna, or in Argos, or Chios, or Colophon, or Salamis, or Rhodes, or Athens. That's the general agreement. If you go beyond that, people begin arguing.